here's Mick, here's Ben Jarofsky, and here is the future governor of Illinois, not this year, but in the future. Thank you.
All right, everybody's still with us? Nobody's left yet?
It's on fire, man.
Well, this is an ongoing joke. Those of you who've been here before, Tim obviously owns the bar. We are grateful to him for offering this space to us. And so we let him / have no choice in letting him warm up the crowd each month, right, Ben? And some of them are warmer than others, some of the warm-ups, right? And some of them are longer than others as well. So
That was a particularly good one.
It felt like an extremely tough act to follow, quite frankly. I don't know if we want to just cancel everything.
Yeah, let's just bring Tim back.
it's actually the perfect act to follow. All right, anyway, we believe we have another guest coming still, Alderman Roderick Sawyer, but we wanted to get started. With us, of course, is State Senator Daniel Biss, and one of the recent contenders for the Democratic nomination for governor. Daniel, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to it.
As I guess we should formally, Tim already sort of warmed everybody up, but this is First Tuesdays. Appropriately enough, we're here on the first Tuesday of every month. And as many of you know, I know there's some first-timers, but I'm Mick of ProPublica.
And I'm Ben Jarofsky from the Chicago Reader and WCTC Radio.
A man who's on a billboard, and you'll see driving north
That
on
is correct.
I-94 from downtown. Don't lose track of traffic or distract yourself.
Oh my God.
That has been up on the
Yeah.
billboard. So
It is
it's
indeed.
true.
I have no twin.
It's
So here we are for another First Tuesday, and Rod Sawyer is supposed to be here.
I
But,
believe that he is on his way. So he assured me earlier
So
that he was.
what we do in radio, Mick, is when the guest doesn't show up or they're late, which happens all the time, we just sort of pretend that it didn't happen. And it's not even hard because we have Dan Biss here, and we could just jump right in and,
That's
oh my
right.
God, Rod Sawyer just walked in. The tricks of radio.
Which he will at some point. All right. Well, let's jump right in. We wanted to get started. A lot of times we introduce people formally. We have them tell the whole backstory. But everybody just heard your backstory for the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah,
or
nobody
6
cares for
months.
sure.
Yeah. All right. Good. We agree on that. So tell us. So what happened? Give us your take. What happened in the primary elections?
Well, J.B. Pritzker won, and I came in second, and Chris Kennedy came in third, and there are other candidates too. I mean, that's a dangerously open-ended question, and we only have an hour, so everyone else put down your mics. Look, I think a few things happened. One thing that happened is that $70 million is a hell of a lot of money, and we learned I at least personally learned in a really up-close way the impact that those kinds of resources can have on a campaign and the role that television has on a campaign like this and so forth. I think at the same time, we built a pretty remarkable campaign. We got a tremendous number of votes. We came in second in a field where, frankly, there was no expectation that that would be possible. And we did it by mobilizing people across the state in a really tremendous and beautiful way around an agenda that I think lives on. And the question that I think is facing us now is what do we do to make sure that that agenda lives well beyond the campaign that was really ultimately a vehicle for that agenda.
When you say that agenda, what do you have on that agenda?
I think fundamentally that agenda needs to be about equality of power in our society. And what we have seen is a real centralization of money and power in the hands of fewer and fewer people in a way that I think is really dangerous for social equity, but also dangerous for democracy. And what we try to do is organize a campaign around the idea that we as state government have a responsibility to push back against that and create structures that create more economic justice. And that I think is critical to our state's survival, just on a basic dollars and cents arithmetic fiscal level, but also ultimately on our democracy's survival.
And just to clarify, you dropped a dollar and cents figure a moment ago, $70 million. And that wasn't the total spent in this race, that was the total spent by J.B. Pritzker, right?
Right, so he was able to spend $70 million, which was enormously meaningful, and what kind of campaign he was able to put together and what kind of effort he was able to build and what sort of advertising existed alongside that. And that was really, really important. And I think if he were here, what he would say is, you're damn right, we're going up against Bruce Rauner in the fall, and so we need that in order to be successful. We were trying to build a campaign on a very different theory of what it takes to be successful, but that debate lives on, right?
And most of that money came from JB himself, right? How much did you and your team raise?
So we raised about $7 million, which in the old days was like a crazy amount of money. Like if you were to just like make a stack of all those dollars, if they were in $1 bills, it would look like a really big stack, which is definitely how campaign operatives devise their strategy. It's just sizes of stacks of money. But like by comparison, right, in 2010 when Janulius and Hoffman and others ran for the Senate, and a pretty hotly contested primary for a really important seat, right? The then sitting President Barack Obama's Senate seat, nobody spent close to $7 million in that primary. So by the old standards, it would have been really quite a significant amount of money. And the Kennedy campaign spent something very similar. And I think part of what is, at least to me, at least kind of concerning is the notion that we're now in this snowball phase where, wow, Rauner spent $15 million of his own money to get nominated in 2014. That's crazy. Well, hey, wait till you see what happened in 2018. Well, what's going to happen in 2022?
Right.
Wait, what does this trajectory really mean?
And there are laws on the books. There's supposed to be limits on contributions. So can you explain how we go from limits on campaign contributions under the law in Illinois to one candidate dropping $70 million and counting, by the way, on the campaign?
Yeah, it's up to 77 now. He's still spending. And the campaign between these two guys is in full swing right now, God help us, in April. So Columbus Day is going to feel great, everybody. So the simple answer is that the simplest answer is that the U.S. Supreme Court, since, by the way, way before Citizens United, so as catastrophically horrible as Citizens United is, don't pin this all on that, there's more to talk about. But the U.S. Supreme Court for decades has ruled that an individual who's running for office has a First Amendment right to spend as much of their own money as they want. So like, for example, in 2010, I think it was, Meg Whitman was running for governor of California. She spent $80-some million in that primary. And, there was Ross Perot in the primary.
Oh, yeah.
There was Ross Perot back in, 1992, spent all that money. And so any candidate can spend as much of their own money for any office, state, federal, or local, because of a long-standing doctrine of free speech. And the rules in Illinois for limits are that once one candidate spends above a certain threshold, which was busted back in March of 2017, once one candidate spends above that threshold, then the idea is, hey, to level the playing field, then nobody has any limits at all, right? So the theory is, all right, if JB is going to give himself $70 million, then Daniel at least can go to his friend Ben Joravsky and ask for $50 million.
And Ben will, of course, say, are you sure you don't need $50 million more?
It didn't work in this particular instance. I think it's something about the neutrality of the press. I don't know.
Yeah. Because, of course, I had the money. So...
We actually arm wrestled over it, interestingly. The wrong strategy.
Yeah, I think I won that one. All right. So, by the way, do you believe that a candidate has a First Amendment right to spend as much just as a principle, do you believe that?
So great. I've never been asked that question directly before. I think it's bad for the system. I'd have to sort of wrestle with what are the slippery slope consequences for freedom of speech if I said we should ban it. But I think it's really bad for the system. I think it's profoundly problematic, and I think a system where that has become kind of, hey, here's the way you get elected nowadays, is a very dangerous system for our country.
I can't get over the absurdity of the fact that we have campaign limits but you can buy your way out of the campaign limits. I mean, that's really what this amounts to.
Well, if you think back to 14, it was more obvious in some respect. So Rauner was really meticulous not to break the limit. The limit is $250,000, right? Once you give yourself $250,000, then there's no limits left. Rauner lived on $249,000 for a really long time, not wanting to break the limits, and all his friends gave him the max, which was like $5,000 or something. And the second he wrote himself that next check to go over the limit, all of his friends who'd given him $5,000 before, then they gave more, and he was getting $100,000 contributions from all over the place. Why? Because the sort of person who can fund his campaign to the tune of whatever Rauner spent tends to be the kind of person who knows other people who can write that type
All
of
right.
check.
So Dan, do you see any way out of this?
Absolutely. And this is why I belabored that little pedantic point about Citizens United. I think a lot of times people say, well, the Supreme Court being what it is, Citizens United created this and we won't be able to fix it until we have a different Supreme Court. I disagree with Citizens United, but I also disagree that Citizens United created this. I think this has been in the works for a long period of time, and there are solutions that work. So for example, I have a bill that I passed out of the Senate. This is not some weird fantasy alternate universe. It's an actual bill pending in the Illinois legislature today that creates a public financing system, a matching system where if you voluntarily accept lower contribution limits and forbid yourself from self-funding, then the small donations you get are matched at a 6-to-1 level. So when someone writes you a $50 check, it's matched by $300 and it becomes $350, and then all of a sudden candidates start spending their time talking to people who can make a $50 contribution, and it changes the whole way people campaign. This is in effect today in New York City. I suspect that Bill de Blasio would tell you he never would have been elected mayor without it. It has fundamentally changed the makeup of their city council. It's younger, it's less white, it's less male, it's more progressive, it's more politically independent. That's to say it's more like the people who it's supposed to represent. I think we ought to pass something like that here in Illinois. And it's also pending in Cook County and the city of Chicago.
Would that prevent somebody like Pritzker or Roderick from just kicking in as much as they want?
It wouldn't, and New York City is a good example on the limits of this approach, right, where Mike Bloomberg was able to spend $100 million and get elected mayor. So it's not a panacea.
3 times.
The
Right.
$100 million, I think, was for the third time.
Right, because he developed a record by then.
Yeah. And he, by the way, he had to change the law to run the third time, because remember there were limits. But
That probably cost money too. There's not a panacea, right? And money is in some sense some liquid form of power, and you're not going to just completely end the connection between money and political power, but I think it can be curtailed in serious ways, and I think this is the most significant doable thing.
all right, well, now let's get to that point. And this is what your campaign really tried to do. If you can't, at this stage, defeat the power that money has, what can you do to try to overcome that huge disadvantage? And you obviously have some thoughts on this, because you, compared to Pritzker, you only had 8 million. My guy Diber had far less, you know what I'm saying? And he couldn't get his message out at all. I think he ended up with 2% of the vote.
All right, first of all, tell the people, did you vote for Bob Dyer?
No, I did not vote for Bob. I wrestled with this for a long time. I ended up voting for Dan Biss, not because I knew he was going to be in my show and I'd have to say it. I have my whole reasons, but I wrestled Diver Biss. Days. Anyway.
You were pretty much the typical voter in this election.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many voters were wrestling between Biss and Diver. I think I was kind of...
All of them.
Yeah.
And then they found it such a toss-up, they went to Pritzker instead.
Somehow it did not work among anybody I know who's thinking of Diver. But anyway, so, all right. So you can't overcome... All right, you're not going to eradicate all the laws right now that allow... that say Pritzker has a First Amendment right, which I think is an interesting interpretation of the First Amendment, to spend as much money as he wants. So what can you do to overcome the impact of money? What can you do creatively on the ground to try to get your message out, to try to just neutralize it?
Well, some of it's just the blocking and tackling of campaigns. I mean, I was so honored by the enormous collection of people around the state who wanted to be a part of volunteering, who were spending significant time banging on doors, making calls. especially in the last 6 weeks or so, but also for months and months before that. So part of it is if you're the sort of candidate who can mobilize people who want to be involved in talking to their friends and neighbors, that matters tremendously. And let's not pretend, and maybe I was the only one pretending in here, but let's not pretend that I'm as good as it gets, right? You could have had a better, more inspirational candidate who would have inspired more people to be a part of it and would have had more people knocking on doors, and that would have made a bigger difference. And the fact is that we still got an awful lot of votes with that significant financial difference. I think that we shouldn't dwell on the fact that in this instance, with this incredibly complicated fact pattern, Pritzker happened to beat me. We should focus on the fact that you can mobilize people to make a real significant impact with a lot less money. By the way, we also were able to utilize volunteers at a high level, right? It wasn't exclusively knocking on doors and making calls, though, man, that's important. We had, with all due humility, I think our digital team just ran circles around the other campaigns' digital teams that had more people and more staff. That was because we hired great people, but it's also because we had a lot of really, really creative, experienced volunteers who were producing content and being a part of that effort. And we were able to integrate people not just at the very bottom level of the campaign, but up and down the chain. And that was enabled us to do stuff that ordinarily cost a bunch of money.
Before we introduce the great Rod Sawyer sitting on my right, just have to ask this this question of you that was just popped into my mind, and that what's that?
Nothing.
The fact of the matter is that I heard this from so many people, and I've said this to you on the radio many times, so you're well rehearsed in answering this question. But I feel as though the public has bought into this attitude, and that is, this is pragmatic attitude. Both sides. The Republicans did the same thing. To beat a billionaire, you have to have a billionaire. And we got our billionaire. And the public bought into that. And you saw the same thing with the Republicans. They defeated Jeannie Ives. She lined up with them on all their beliefs, but they went with Rauner because they wanted to win. And so when the public's that cynical, or pragmatic, if you will, how do you deal with that?
Listen, I don't begrudge anybody in Illinois trying to do what they thought was best to beat Bruce Rauner. Right? That's super important. That's genuinely important. There's a lot at stake to beat Bruce Rauner, and if the public if a particular voter felt that the way to do it was someone with the bigger checkbook to fund a campaign more, I don't begrudge them that. My responsibility as a candidate was to inspire people with a different philosophy of how to run campaigns, and I think we just need to keep on doing that and do more of that and do that better. And ultimately, the thing that most persuades someone is having the opportunity to look in the eye a person who cares deeply about the campaign, whether it's a candidate themselves or a volunteer, and have a real human conversation. And if you can inspire enough people to engage in that sort of activity, you can beat any amount of money. And we just need to keep on doing the work until we can build that kind of operation to do that in every corner of the state.
All right, very good. We've been joined on stage by 6th Ward Alderman Rod Sawyer, and also 6th Ward Democratic Committeeman, and maybe Cook County Democratic Party Chairman, maybe. He's going to announce his candidacy from this stage. If we give him enough of those. But to force you into the conversation where it is right now, I'm going to ask you the question I just asked Dan here, which is, we were talking about the influence of money, and before you got here, Dan was talking about how he was up against Pritzker. Okay, yeah. So you know what he was up against. So the public has bought into that notion, in my humble opinion, that you need money. That's the way the game is played. If you're going to win the game, you have to play by the game. You can't go into a fight with your arm tied behind your back. Now, do you believe the public is? You look like you don't believe.
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't.
You think I'm more jaded than you are?
No, well, my position is, and first of all, I want to congratulate Dan Biss for running a phenomenal campaign. He did a great job in his campaign. And the problem I had with that, and even though I was a JB supporter, and I do like JB, I've considered him a friend. We've gotten along quite well. But I think Dan did an excellent job raising the issues. I think he did a good job, excellent job, again, energizing voters. And it was a great race. When I was sitting there watching it at my office that night, and we were sitting, we had a group of people we were watching, we had food and whatnot, and we're sitting, and everybody's like, no, Dan's gonna come in. I said, no, Dan's coming in second. Dan's moving. Look, and as the numbers were moving, I said, whoa, Dan is making a move. Dan's making moves, and it was constant watching it. And I was extremely proud because I consider Dan a friend. He's a great guy and an excellent public official. But to your question, I don't want us to think that it's always necessary to have billionaires be political candidates. If that's the case, Dan and I are both out of this business because I think I'm the only one that's more broke than Dan. And I don't want people to have that concept that you have to have a billionaire to be the billionaire. But I thought at the same time it was a crucial time because I think Rauner is ruining us right now, statewide, and we wanted someone that we could make sure that could beat him in the fall. And the numbers were up, from themselves because a lot of people thought, and a great number thought that Dan could do that. And I still think, had Dan been elected, he would be a great candidate going into November, and Dan would beat. I can't curse on this show, can I?
Well, you can.
No. Dan would beat the mess out of. Dan would have beat the mess out of Bruce Rauner. No doubt about that. So I just don't want us to think that you needed a billionaire to beat a billionaire, though.
Why is that so prevalent?
Well, I know, being a member of the party, as you alluded to, and I am a member of the party, and I try to fight the party from within, because you got to have, in order to fight it, you have to have somebody in it, and I like to try to stay in it, and sometimes it's distasteful, I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's tough to be a member of the Democratic Party, but in order to fight it, and when we have meetings, trust me, when these meetings are hot, a lot of expletives are involved, because particularly those like myself and a few others, who want to be a part of the party, but we want to see the party change. We think the party as it stands right now is not functioning. As the Cook County Democratic Party I'm referring to. And it's not functioning properly. It's not running the way it should be. For us to expect that we can do miracles, if you give us $40,000, we do $1 million for you and you think that's going to win the election, that's not going to win an election. You all know that. We have to do more. We have to be more engaging with people. I would dare say, a good portion of people in here are Democrats, but they don't feel engaged by the Cook County Democratic Party because we don't do anything to outreach to them. Yeah. We don't reach out to you.
To those watching the video, there's a lot of nodding going on.
And that's right, and that's correct. We don't reach out to you, and that's one of the problems that we have when we talk about the party. We're not inclusive. I thought that being a Democrat was being inclusive, having all people being a part of this party, and I thought that was great about being a Democrat, really? But we're not doing it. So I do have a problem with that, and I want to make sure that we fight for those types of values from within. I know I took a lot of hits for supporting some candidates, which I did, and I'm not going to back off of that because I was supportive of the party. But in those party discussions, we did talk about that quite a bit, and some of those candidates almost won the nomination. So, but best man won. I said, okay, we didn't win it this time, but I'm going to support the party slate. But we get into another conversation because the party is not always reciprocal in that. People still pick off from the party when they feel that it's just. And I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of it's racial. We have a lot, and I'll talk about it because last election cycle, I'll go back to 2 years ago. We fought and we fought and we fought for a diverse slate of judges. Black, Asian, women, white, Latino. All of our black judges and our Latino judges and our Asian judges, I think with the exception of one who had the name John Fitzgerald, lost. They lost because members of the party who I'm a part of said, I don't want to support that. I'd just rather support my own candidate. And that's what they did. And that's not how I was raised. I was raised that you do an election, you make a selection in a party. Once you slate somebody, you support the slate. And trust me, I've slated, worked with some distasteful people, but the party was slated. And being a member of the party, I was obligated. I felt that I should do that because that's how I was raised. That's how I was in a Democratic family, in a strong party family. And that's how we operated. But it was fair. But if it's not going to be fair, then what's the sense of me being a Democratic committee? I got to spend $10,000 per election, even when I'm not running, to operate, to feed judges, to have people pass out palm cards. Like this election, I spent over $10,000 for, and I'm not on the ballot. But that's part of what I do as a Democratic committeeman, because I bought into that. That's for whatever reason I'm in that. But it's got to change.
All right, just so we'll let you fit. I just want to let. I'm sure everybody knows this, but just in case there's some youngsters out there, that Sawyer name is a familiar name in Chicago politics. Rod's father, Eugene Sawyer, was mayor of the city of Chicago from 1987 to 1989. And before that, he was the alderman of the 6th Ward, and also the Democratic committeeman. So anyway, Dan, we were going to say something.
And I don't want to put in, I just want to answer your question directly when you asked Rod, yeah, but why do people think that you've got to have the money to run? I think you're putting a lot on the electorate here. I mean, just look around, right? Donald Trump is your president, Bruce Rauner is your governor, Rahm Emanuel is your mayor, and in this election that just happened, the overwhelming majority of competitive races were in a situation where the person who won also spent the most dollars per vote. And so all of the kind of simple, easy to find evidence just sitting on the table is, all right, I guess money is what you need. And I think those of us who, to our core, believe A, that it doesn't have to be that way, and B, that it's freaking terrible if it is that way, we have a special burden to demonstrate, no, here's a better way to run, and here's a way to run and build a powerful coalition and win. And I think that the campaign that we put together was a step in that direction with a 10-to-1 money disadvantage, still running a competitive race. But ultimately, we've got to win some battles like that to show people who are like, I want to be with the progressive and not the money person, but I want to first know that it's not hopeless,
Well, what Alderman Sawyer just pointed out in his illustration is just absolute. I'm not investigating any of the allegations you made, but it's just to see. We have a party apparatus that says we're going to agree to support this person, that person, and the other person, and so much is contingent on a palm card, which, by the way, is a form of insanity in and of itself. Why anybody would believe what some stranger in the street hands them. I thought we were all supposed to be smart and sophisticated in the city. Just believe what I give you on this card.
That's part of the remnants of what once was a sophisticated organization, which was the Democratic Party. And you know what that was fueled by, and that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, it was fueled by patronage, by jobs,
absolutely,
real
by jobs, absolutely.
Which we got rid of in the name of reform,
yes.
Which just screwed some people and not other people.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about some specifics here. The Cook County Democratic Party endorsed its chairman in his attempt to hold on to his seat as the Cook County assessor, right? And he ended up losing.
Yes, he did.
And he lost to a self-professed reform candidate who also dropped $1.5 million on the race.
Yes, he did.
So you're starting to see, Dan, why people say.
Well, I think there are all sorts of interesting dynamics because the money thing is easy to point out. Berrios's weaknesses. My colleague at ProPublica did some amazing investigative journalism showing that the assessor's office really wasn't doing its job. And I continue to argue that if the assessor's office had done its job, the number of Berrios relatives on the payroll, no one would have cared about it if it had just done its job. But it didn't, and the word got out, and that was the reason to throw him out. On the other hand, let's talk some more about race. Puerto Rican guy. He was the first Hispanic member of the Illinois General Assembly. Ben and I have been talking about the fact he still carried most of the African American wards, and I think at least a large number of the Hispanic wards in the city of Chicago. So the reformers are mostly white people in this case. Let's talk about that. Are we looking here at a racial issue that doesn't exist? Are there double standards? Or what happened in particular with the politics of the Berrios race? Either of you guys.
Well, I think that, Mr. Berrios was subjected to a couple of recent losses in his campaign, in his organization. He lost his daughter, I believe. He lost one of his other members. He lost Ray Suarez, his alderman, so it was...
loss it, we're meaning electoral losses.
Yes. I'm sorry, that's correct, absolutely. Yeah, he had a string of defeats. And the handwriting pretty much seemed to be on the wall that he was going to lose that one as well. But I don't know if I would put too much race politics in that one. It was just I don't know. Maybe they felt, for whatever reason, Chris Kay is a good guy. I mean, he's a decent guy. He was friends of mine that played baseball in high school, so I remembered him from back then. But he ran a better campaign. He stuck with issues. Barrios was relying upon a flawed system. Even though the system was flawed before he got there, he didn't do enough to reform it. So it kind of fell upon him, and it worked out best for Fritz Kay.
If I could follow up with a, can I ask a question? Is that cool? Awesome. I guess to me the interesting part, and I was otherwise occupied during a lot of the assessor race, so I didn't follow it too closely. And I'll be honest, Mick, I haven't really dissected the returns either. But if it's the case that Barrios did especially well in African American majority neighborhoods, what I found striking about the information that came out before the election was that it was specifically majority African American neighborhoods that were harmed by the broken assessment system. And I think that's an interesting dichotomy, that on the one hand that's the problem being addressed, on the other hand the votes that were cast to hopefully solve that problem came from different parts of the county. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I did look at that. I looked at the numbers a little bit within the assessor's race, and it is kind of odd, because you're correct. I agree with you. But I'll tell you also this. In my area, for example, most of my homeowners are seniors. My seniors get senior freezes, senior exemptions. Their rates, quite honestly, are just a couple of $100s a year. So they're actually the assessment thing doesn't play well with them. They don't get it because they pay such a small amount in property taxes anyway. So, it doesn't, and those are my majority voters as well. Now, we need to talk about maybe the millennial effect or the lack thereof in down ballot races. I don't know what the fallout was, but I know for the down ballot races like judges, hardly anybody voted for those races at all. And even the statewide turnout's only around 30%. Where are all these engaged people? I want to see them. I'm hoping that we can do better in the fall, and I wish we would have done better in the primary.
Well, here's the reality. Is one of my favorite obsessions of the moment, the assessor's race. You weren't paying attention because you were running your own race, but Fritz Kagi essentially knocked off the ballot Andrea Rail, a third-party person in the race, for 2 crucial weeks of the election. How this is legal in Cook County, or in America, excuse me, when you're the chairman of the party, hope you can fix this. Somehow or other, this was considered legal and fair to have an election where one candidate who was eventually certified and put on the ballot was kept from being somehow or other. Art Jones got to run the whole time, but Andrea
He's the
Raylan
Nazi.
the Nazi got to run, but Andrea Raylan
And that's not an exaggeration. He was the self-admitted Nazi.
Yeah, that's his platform. So I think that's plays a big role. I think Andrea would have won that race had she been on it for full time. She got 20% of the vote as it was, and so I think that's a huge problem. And then the other thing is just this bizarre. You were alluding to this, or you were there. Okay, if the system favors wealthier white homeowners, and Fritz Kagi has pledged to eradicate those flaws that give the wealthy white people the advantage, all these wealthy white people who just voted for Fritz Kagi are just voted to raise their property taxes.
Right.
So I think they decided that he really wasn't going to fix the problem.
I think you're hearing the exact inverse of the fascinating thing Rod just said. Right? Rod just said, the property tax system screws over my ward, but maybe the people in my ward who pay property taxes aren't paying that much anyway, so they're not that worked up about it. You come to Evanston and you tell people the property tax system is screwed up. They look at their bill and they're like, yeah, the property tax system is screwed up. And then if in the fine print of what you're saying, what you explain is, hey guys, it's screwed up because you're not paying enough, They don't hear that part
Yeah,
because
I know.
they're so worked up about how they're paying too much.
So what you're telling me is that the good people of Evanston voted for Fritz Kangi. Oh boy, they voted for Fritz Kangi because somehow or other the message that he conveyed to them that he was going to lower their property taxes, when in reality, if he does what he says he's going to do, he's going to raise their.
I mean, there's actually a serious allegation there, so let me be serious. No, I'm not saying that, but I do think that in the communities, particularly in the suburbs, right? Because the city's a little bit different in its rates, but particularly in the suburbs, the communities with high property taxes, it's just a salient issue. And I did this explicit experiment, right? I would be in a room where I'd say, and the property tax system is rigged, and people would applaud, and I'd be like, hey, guys, guess what? It's not rigged against this neighborhood. And then I'd explain it, and people at the end would be like, listen, all I know is the system seems screwed up, and if you're telling me there's evidence that it's screwed up, I'll vote for the guy who's going to try to fix it. And I think that just the fact that total dollars paid in the property tax system in those suburban communities are so high just makes it easier to wake people up to the issue.
Well, what about in the governor's race? What about your efforts, Dan, to reach out and get African American voters? You didn't do as well as J.B. Pritzker did in those wards either. Is that because you're white progressive? You have a hard time translating there, or what's? And I'm just being candid. What do you think went on there?
Yeah, I think it's a series of phenomena. We obviously spend a significant amount of effort in the African American community, and had real success at a certain level. Got Robin Kelly's endorsement and endorsements of people like Will Davis and Carol Ammons, and that helped us a lot. But ultimately, we felt that a lot of doors were closed to us. I spent every Sunday morning in majority African American churches, but I would be talking to 25 people on a Sunday that JB would be talking to 2,500 people. And I think that might be because of who I am or where I come from or the relationships that I had coming into this. I can't speak to the full details of how that came to be, but I do think it was really interesting. If you run the tape back a year, right? Just imagine yourself April, what is it, 3rd?
Yeah.
All right. Imagine yourself April 3rd of 2017 and game out the upcoming election, the upcoming Democratic primary for governor. You're probably not talking about Daniel Biss at all, frankly, but you're thinking about Pritzker and Kennedy, and the assumption early on was that Kennedy would have a natural advantage in the African American community, and yet Pritzker absolutely cleaned up. Like in the 6th ward, I think Pritzker got 60% or more, probably.
65.
Yeah.
That's because of Rod's palm cards.
The palm cards were amazing.
I mailed mine out, so yeah, it went straight to the voter.
I did hear the palm cards were really impressive. But I think ultimately there comes to be a kind of snowball effect where a series of different institutional forces and a lot of effective campaign work together create the sense of a consensus in certain neighborhoods. And I also think the thing we were talking about earlier really matters here, right? In some level, my campaign was a leap of faith, right? My campaign wasn't saying, we're going to do it the way we've done it before and it's going to keep on working the way it's worked before. My campaign was saying, we're going to try something different and better, or we're going to break the status quo, and that's going to be this transformational moment in Illinois. And if you put yourself in the shoes of a voter and try to guess who's going to be quickest to want to take that leap of faith and who's going to be least quick, I would say the community that has been most mistreated by the political system is going to be the most wary of a message like that. And I just don't think I was able over the course of that year to persuade enough people in the African American community, no, this is serious, no, this is real. Yes, I understand the kind of injustices this community's been subjected to by a series of people in Illinois politics for generations, many of whom have said a lot of the right things and then turned out to screw the community over. I get that and understand that, and here's why this is different, and here's how we're going to do it together. There's a lot of leaps of faith to make work in that situation, and I just didn't get there, in my opinion. I would trust the African American alderman and committee on the stage to have some thoughts on the topic as well, though.
Well, one of the things that we were concerned about when looking at the election was Kennedy, quite honestly. As someone that's a local elected in a 98% African American community, I have opportunities to go into people's homes and talk to mostly my seniors. And on a good portion of everyone's home, there's 3 pictures. And you've heard there's Jesus, there's Martin Luther King,
and my uncle.
and Robert F. or John Kennedy or Robert F. Kennedy And those that are slightly younger, there's a Harold Washington. But I mean, these are the pictures that are in people's homes. You know, it's phenomenal. And that right now, the Obama pictures now with the young, and that's for a slightly younger group. But I'm talking about my seniors that are 80, 70, 80 years old. Jesus, Martin Luther King, and a Kennedy. No, without fail, they're there. So the concern was Kennedy was going to, you know, really sweep up the African American community, and I was surprised when it did not translate that way. I know that, you know, as much as we all try to be like our fathers, you know, we're not quite there. I admit that I'm not my father, but as much as I like to be and idolize my dad, you know, I'm an individual person, and Chris is an individual whose message was interesting, but I'm gonna be honest with you, it was kind of harsh. You know, his message was, and I met with Kennedy several times as I was talking to candidates. I met with him several times, and I'm not saying it wasn't true, but his message was, hey, your schools are horrible. What are you, stupid? You know, why would you send your children there?
Well,
I mean,
he went another step, though.
Yeah.
He actually said the city of Chicago, led by the mayor of Chicago, is divesting from African American neighborhoods,
That's right.
which someone just said it's true. A lot of people in the neighborhoods feel it's true. I won't. Well, I mean, let's survey on this stage. How many of us think it's true? I think at least 3 of us. All right.
I know it's true.
Whether it started with Rahm Emanuel or
Like I said,
started
it
with
went
someone
way
else.
before that, I think.
Yeah, okay.
And I think
Whether
that
it
was
started
a-
with Rahm or Daley.
But it's
whatever.
true. But
I
he
think
said
that was
this.
a challenge for the message, right?
Yeah.
And he came out, and then there was, I thought it was just a fascinating response to him saying that, because you had, of course, the editorial boards of the daily newspaper slamming him. How could you say this? This is outrageous. You had a lot of elected officials saying, oh, he's way off the charts. And then, you know, all of
I think he
us
was
heard
correct.
people
I
saying,
think he
the
was
guy's
correct.
finally speaking
Right.
the truth. Yeah. He was also, of course, dismissed as this is just a wild gambit to try to get attention, and his campaign is struggling, whatever. But a lot of people really did say this is true.
No, I mean, he would come out with stats. I mean, I'm sure you all have seen them. He would go in a particular area and pull up every high school in that particular area, and it would show that only 1 or 2% were reading at or above that level in the high schools, or scoring at a base level on the ACT or the SAT. And it was a bit, I mean, I know to a lot of people I talked to, they felt it was a little off-putting. May have been true, but they kind of felt, as the kids say, a certain kind of way about that. And for whatever it's worth. And it was, I mean, the way he styled it, and I remember talking to him, he said, you know, I'm a contractor, and I couldn't even hire these guys to work on my construction crew. But this is what he's saying to the public, and it was kind of, again, it was off-putting.
Offensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it wasn't true, but it was off-putting a little bit.
Well, let's look ahead a little bit. Let's talk first of all about the governor's race in the fall. You guys are obviously both Democrats. I fully expect you to say J.B. Pritzker is going to win this race, but let's talk about what do you expect to unfold between now and November? Astronomical sums of money, we know that. But what are the things that are going to get voters interested in this race?
Well, I think this race is going to be expensive. It's going to be ugly. I think I can comfortably tell you right now that Bruce Rauner is really bad at governing, and that it's important to defeat him. And I think most people anywhere on the kind of center to left side of the ideological spectrum, or anywhere in the Democratic Party, agree. And that might be enough. That, together with an incredible amount of money, might be enough for J.B. Pritzker to win. And certainly, you know, we need to beat Rauner. We need to. What I would hope happens is that in the course of these next 7 months, Pritzker is able to motivate people with an aspirational message about what the state of Illinois could be and what he could do for the state of Illinois. What I would hope to be able to do after discussions with Pritzker is to go to the people who voted for me and say, hey guys, thanks for your help. It was an honor to work together. We're going to keep fighting for the same issues. I've been saying all along that we need to unite to defeat Bruce Rauner, but guess what? I just had this conversation with JB Pritzker, and here's a thing that we can be sure he will do that's going to be something that we believe in together, and that's why working for him in the November election will be really an extension of fighting for the values we were fighting for. And if I become able to say that kind of thing, I think we're going to see other progressives who might have not voted for Pritzker in the primary, who voted for Kennedy or me or Diber, in the primary, not just maybe show up and reluctantly vote for him, or maybe not, depending on the weather, but actually be motivated to vote for him, in which case we'll have a massive, massive landslide, which would then also create for him the electoral mandate to do the awesome progressive stuff that hopefully he'll be campaigning on.
Well, you're not going to campaign for Rodder, obviously, but you sort of skillfully put a couple little conditions in on whether or how you would go out working for JB Pritzker. What do you mean by that? What do you need to hear from him? Are there specific things you need to hear from him before you're going to go to your supporters saying, hey, let's go all in for this guy?
And to be clear, I'm ready right now on April 3rd to say Bruce Rauner sucks, we've got to beat him. Right? That doesn't matter what almost JB says, that I have been in the legislature with Bruce Rauner as the governor. I know how important it is to beat him. But again, you've got all kinds of people saying that. Who cares if Daniel adds his voice to that chorus? What I would like to be able to say is, hey, here is J.B. Pritzker's plan on campaign finance reform. You know what? J.B. Pritzker and I had a disagreement about whether the right way to beat Bruce Rauner was with our own self-funder, but a lot of people agreed with J.B. that with this current rotten system, that's the best way we can ensure victory. And the great thing about J.B. is he's willing to do X, Y, and Z to make sure that we don't have to go through that 4 years from now. That's something that we should be willing to fight for together. Or I could say, hey, listen, the first thing I started talking about in this campaign was amending the Constitution to ensure a progressive income tax. And J.B. Pritzker not only is for that, but he knows that there have been times that we had Democratic majorities and Democratic governors, all of them supported it, and it didn't happen. And here's his clear plan, his concrete plan for how we're going to get it done this time. Gosh, that's important. That's exciting to fight for. That's what I would like to be able to say.
Do you guys have a meeting scheduled? Have you sought a meeting? How's this going to come about?
We've met once so far, and I expect we'll continue having conversations because I'm not asking for stuff I'm not saying, hey, JB, here's an issue where I said, let's do this, and you said, let's do the opposite of this, and you won and I lost, and now I'm saying, flip your position. That would be unreasonable. That's what elections are for. I get it. I'm saying, here's an issue where we were pretty close all along. Let's now put together a concrete, actionable plan with accountability so I can go to the folks who are generous enough to help me and vote for me and say, here's why we can know that something great's going to happen when J.B. Pritzker becomes governor.
Just to change the subject once, I can't have you sitting next to me without asking. You've already asked you if you're going to run for Cook County chairman of the party. You kind of avoided that one. All right. So,
did you actually ask Ben, or you urged?
Yeah. So, are you running for Cook County chairman?
No, it doesn't look like I'm going to run for Cook County chairman, but I am interested in running for one of the executive positions.
Okay. Once again, you'll let no. I'm just kidding. All right. So, here's my question for you. I'm watching with great fascination the emerging mayoral race between Rahm Emanuel and, as I call him, Big Mac and Gary McCarthy. It's truly one of the most delightful spectacles I've ever seen. As they each throw the other under the bus for the Laquan McDonald video. I would have released it, but Rahm wouldn't let me. All right. So, what's your take on all this?
My position on this is pretty simple. As superintendent of police, I understand that he's under certain constraints as far as firing, what he can do because of the union contract. But what he could have said, because he did admit seeing the tape right away, we don't know whether the mayor saw it or not. It's been conflicting evidence to say yes or no. But it's clear.
There's conflict. Is there evidence? I never
Well, he
saw
said
it.
that he said no. He did
Yeah,
not see it.
nobody believes it. I'm just saying, is there any evidence?
Well, I was in corporation counsel, and as a lawyer, I probably would advise him not to look at it. But I would have told the superintendent of police to come out and say, hey, there was a horrible incident that occurred. This officer was way beyond the bounds of duty. In my opinion, he should not only be fired, he should be prosecuted. My hands are tied. All I can do is sit him at a desk. But believe me, that's all he's going to do is sit at a desk until such a time that, we talk to the state's attorney and we talk to all the powers that be that can make that decision to get him off the force and get him indicted. And this is not indicative of our fine police officers at Chicago Police Department. I think that the thing would have been defused. Had he said that and been outraged about it, which he should have been, and that's my problem, is I don't see the outrage from anybody, particularly from McCarthy. That was a horrible thing. That's one of the most horrible things I've ever seen in my life. This guy sat there, shot and shot and shot, and from what the account was, he was going to reload and shoot some more. That's horrible. So for him not to say that this is a horrible thing, a horrible, horrible situation from one rogue cop, it's not indicative of the entire police department. This is one rogue, horrible cop that did a horrible thing to this young man that they could have subdued with ease. This guy had a little penknife. A knife no bigger than this. What was he going to do with 20 police officers around? You know, nothing. So, I mean, I didn't see that type of outrage, and that's what I was looking for from McCarthy, and that's what I was disappointed about.
Yeah, that said, you gotta admit, it's pretty fun to watch this. I hear you though, everything you said is true.
Don't forget about Paul Vallis, the other head on this three-headed monster that appears to be emerging.
Oh, God.
Well, you know, the thing about Paul Vallis is, and it's interesting because I know I've heard that Paul is running based on his record at Chicago Public Schools. Well, this is what I will say. That this is what I mean, not on the performance of the schools so much, but
Financial end.
on the financial end. And he said that he hired more minorities, African Americans, and Hispanics than any other head of a school at Chicago ever. So that's what he's saying. But
Have you heard
big
from
so
your
what.
constituents about this? Are people talking about this already? Are people done with Rahm? All those things.
Well, I think people are frustrated with the current administration. I won't say that you can't count them out yet, but I will say that people are looking at alternatives. I mean, people are looking at people like even Willie Wilson in my neighborhood, which is, like I said, it's predominantly African American. Willie is a nice guy. I will say that. His message, though, I think, and I've heard what the things that he was trying to do, and I think he's trying to do too much all at one time.
This
You know, he's trying to
this
do-
is the businessman who self-made millionaire,
Self-made former owner of McDonald's franchises,
and ran
now,
4 years ago.
And ran 4 years ago. That's correct. And got what?
Forced a runoff.
Forced a
Let's give him
runoff.
credit, man.
Yeah, he
The guy
did. He
forced
forced
a
a runoff. He did. But I mean, I was listening to his message. You know, he wants to do all these things, and they're all laudable, but financially impossible to do. So for someone that's been there for a little while now and understand the city's finances, the things that he would promise us to do would drive us into bankruptcy within a year. And it's unfortunate to say, but I that's my concern about Mr. Wilson. Mr. Vallis, I just don't know where he's, what he's doing. I'm not really sure. I had a problem with him when he was out in the school in my area, Chicago State, first trying to be the chancellor or the president, which I didn't think he had the credentials to do. And so I'm just concerned about Paul. I have not met with him yet. I don't know what his real plans are. I'm sure I will meet with him soon and have a conversation with him. And I'll even be willing to talk to Gary McCarthy and see what he has to say. I'm curious. There's no other reason. No, we had a cordial relationship when he was police commissioner, the superintendent. So, I think he just had his time. I mean, he was there 5 years, and I think there was maybe a year too long. And I think it was just showing that he had problems identifying with the average citizen as opposed, taking sides with the police a little too heavy. And I think that was my problem with McCarthy.
Surely you have been approached as well. You've just basically
One or two people.
you've basically been ruled out running for the Cook County Democratic Party chairmanship. What about mayor?
I have not. I mean, I've talked to a couple of people that have asked me to run, and I don't think it was not a big avalanche of support. Money has not been pouring into my campaign coffers. So, although I'm having something next week, but no, it's I would be lying to you if I said I would never want to be the mayor of Chicago one day. That would be an outright lie. Of course, all of us that serve on the local end, a lot of us, I won't say all of us, but a lot of us would like the opportunity to serve as mayor one time. Although I enjoy what I do right now, I've engaged with a lot of people. I'm getting some things done in the neighborhood I was raised in my entire life, which is also exciting for me. You know, I'm getting some things done that have not been done in my area in a long time, and I'm happy about that, and I think we have more work to do, and I really want to kind of see it through in the 6th Ward.
Would anything change your mind over the next few months, which is sort of the time frame? This is like kind of the time to get it together. What if there was an outpouring support? What if this fundraiser, all the people who are at the Hideout right now, they brought their whole families and you all suddenly got some money? Seriously, is there anything that would nudge you in?
Well, what I will say is anything is possible, but right now, as I see it, I'll be happy with running for re-election this time because I want to finish the work out, some more work in the 6th Ward, but short of some overwhelming groundswell of support, I don't see me doing it right now.
Should we take some questions from the audience?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Tim. That was Tim's cue. Still basking in the glow of his opening speech.
Sorry. Thank you, Tim. I'm Regan Burke. Hi, Daniel. And I really am confused about what happens with this progressive income tax. So Rich Miller reported this morning that JB was asked 4 different times, what's his plan? And then he said he only has 30 days to put it on the ballot. What's that mean?
Okay, so I'll start with the quick, hopefully boring civics lesson and then talk about the hopefully less boring stuff. The question is, do we want to put it on the ballot in 2018 or in 2020? The answer, of course, is we want to put it on the ballot as soon as possible, which would mean 2018. To get that done requires having the vote, in the next month or something. If that's doable, sign me up. You tell me what wall to walk through, what fire to walk through. I'm there. I think some people are skeptical about whether that's doable. If that's not doable, then it's got to go on the 2020 ballot. And then some people will say, but 2020 is a long time to wait. We've got fiscal problems now. Why worry? And this is where it's time for us to put our foots down. Those are feet, really, not foots. But you know how overcome I am when that basic command of grammar has utterly left me. So overcome am I with passion to tax the rich, finally.
You're a mathematician.
Right, and I can tell you exactly how many foots there are. That was a good comedic interlude between the first boring part and the second boring part. Here we go. For decades, people have said, yeah, progressive income tax is probably the right thing, but it's going to take a few years, and we've got problems now, and why go through the hassle now? And for many of those years, we've had Democratic governors who supported the concept and Democratic majorities in the legislature who altogether said, yeah, it's a good idea, but it takes too long. Let's deal with the immediate, not with the long term. And here we are, damn it, in 2018, still screwed over with that rotten provision in our Constitution. And so if JB, with any help any of us can provide, is able to get that on the 2018 ballot, hallelujah. But if that doesn't happen, what we need to do with him is to figure out what's the concrete plan that you can share with us, that we can be a part of, that we can be confident means that this will actually be on the 2020 ballot, so that a decade from now, there's a chance that our finances will be fixed. And in order for me to go out and campaign enthusiastically, that's the kind of thing I need to be able to talk about. Hey, this is an important thing that's going to matter to make Illinois more just, Illinois more fair, Illinois work properly, and here's a concrete reason that I feel confident that if we elect J.B. Pritzker, it's going to happen.
Yeah, to get it on the ballot in 2018 for the gubernatorial race, you would have to have it passed by May 8th, I believe is the date. It has to come out. So in other words, it has to pass with a 3/5 majority in the House. So you got to get right. So there's all these political ramifications. So, no. This is just straight up vote in the General Assembly. So you need 71 votes in the House, and you need 36 or 37 votes in the Senate. So you got enough Democrats in the Senate to put it on the ballot right now. You do not have enough Democrats in the House to put it in the ballot. There's only 67 67 Democrats in the House, need 71 to get on the ballot. I'm not a mathematician. I do know you're 4 votes short. So we need
It just so happens Dan actually is a mathematician.
So I just looked at him to make sure 67 to 4 to 71. He gave me the nod. Now, that assumes that all 67 Democrats are going to vote for it. That's not going to happen. Madigan's going to protect his incumbents. At least 7 of them won't vote. You're going to need 11 Republicans to cross over. Really don't think you're going to find 11 Republicans. So is Mike Madigan going to have that vote? Is he going to allow that vote where he is going to have Republicans vote no to this? I think, and I'll ask the political brains on this stage, he's going to be figuring out what will cause more damage to the Republican Party. Putting this up to a vote or not putting up to a vote. It has nothing to do with whether it's a good idea for the long-term interests of the state of Illinois that we have. This is Mike Madigan playing politics.
Right, so he's not focused on the long-term interest of the state of Illinois, as you guys might have noticed. My gut tells me that it's not gonna come up for a vote, and that some of the air might get let out of this balloon, and then we need a gubernatorial nominee to say, no, 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 it's worth keeping the fight for 2 more years because to have the state that we deserve, this is necessary. And then we need that gubernatorial nominee to say, I remember what happened in 2013 and 2014 when it looked like it should have been doable, but the votes somehow fizzled even though the governor then was for it. Here's why it's going to be different now.
Dan, and then maybe I need to ask a question because it's something that you can educate me on. I was just with J.B. Pritzker about an hour or so ago, and we were talking about this exact issue. And I know he was telling me about the interim plan. I know Kennedy was kind of pushing that Massachusetts plan. I don't know enough about it. I read a little bit about it, but do you know any more about the Massachusetts plan?
I mean, the idea is, so we're stuck with a flat income tax according to our Constitution. It's 4.95%. Whether you make $200 million a year or $20,000 a year, you pay 4.95%, except there's an exemption, so you subtract off $2,500, and there's also an earned income tax credit, so if you're low income, you get some back, and there's the opportunity for things like child tax credits and so forth. So the Massachusetts idea, and I read a story on the way over here that suggests that JB was talking about this today, was raise the tax rate, but do this other stuff to protect low income and working and perhaps middle class people from the consequences of
Backdoor
it.
progressive.
It may work well, it may work sort of well, it's likely better than nothing. I'm not running for governor, it's not my choice to figure that out. What we should not do though, Rod, is we should not allow that to replace what needs to be the goal, because if we do that, then a decade from now we'll still be screwed.
Same thing.
But if we do it right and repeal that rotten provision from the Constitution, which might not happen till the 2020 ballot, then we'll actually be okay in a decade.
Wow. Next question.
First of all, I've heard rumors, or actually I understand that it's legal requirement that the place has to change its name to the Hideout at Lincoln Yards. Is that going to happen?
Too soon, Ken, too soon.
Can't go into all the details now.
Could you address why the African American community that you're familiar with didn't respond more negatively to the whole J.B. Pritzker, the tapes and all the things that were said on the tapes?
Sure. And just remind people,
Sure,
we'll
I will.
assume everyone has followed this, but just quick primer on what that.
During the election cycle, there was a commercial by the Rauner campaign that took some FBI wiretap tapes that had J.B. Pritzker talking to then Governor Blagojevich right after the presidential election in which Barack Obama won. And at that point, Blagojevich had the opportunity to replace, at that time, Senator Barack Obama's seat with someone else. The conventional wisdom was that they would replace it with another African American. And J.B. Pritzker, being an influential guy that he is, could call the governor, I guess, whenever he wants. He's talking to the governor, they were having conversations, and during the part of the tape included conversations about certain people and about their electability. And they used words that were, in my opinion, they were a little offensive. And they were offensive. And I matter of fact, when they came out, Matter of fact, before I called, I got a call from JB's campaign from one of his senior political director, and he said, "You seen?" I said, "I just saw this a few minutes ago. That was screwed up." I didn't say that, but I said it was screwed up. And he said, "Yeah, you know what?" He said, "Yeah, you're right, it was." And can you take a call? And I said, "Sure." I got a call from JB Pritzker. We talked about it, and I slammed him out. We talked about it frankly. That was, and I said the same thing. That was JB. That was kind of screwed up. And he said, "Rod, I'm so sorry. I apologize." And we had a long conversation about it, and he said, "You know what? That was not my intention." And what I did understand, and listening to the conversation, and talking to JB Pritzker about it. I mean, the conversation was they were trying to replace an African American with an African American. As a committeeman, I've had similar conversations when we've had vacancies occur, and we talk about the list of individuals that are interested in the job. I would be embarrassed if you heard some of my conversations when we're talking about individuals, black, white, Latino, whoever it was, because what we're talking about is, can this person win an election on their own if we appoint them? And really, that's that's the goal. You want to make sure that person is electable. So when we're having this conversation, for example, I had one recently. We just appointed a state representative, and we were sitting in the room, and we're talking about the list of candidates. And the conversations did get a little dicey on occasions because there were some candidates that were less favorable than others. There were some that had some political baggage, and we talk about that baggage frankly in that room. Would I want that conversation to be taped and replayed? In all honesty, no, I would not, because me talking amongst my colleagues in that frame of space, it would sound a little bit off-putting if you heard it without any background about it. If I'm saying, "Oh man, that person, oh no, that person is horrible. Come on, we can't do that. That person's offensive. That person, farts in public," or whatever, we talk about. But we talk about things that I wouldn't want the general public to hear. Was that conversation offensive? Yes, it was. It was offensive primarily because it got out. But I think when people really understand, the bottom line is, they were intent on replacing an African American with another African American. Now, my problem with that whole thing was not necessarily that, and which has nothing to do with the election, but we did not do enough to support Roland Burris in that position, who was a fine man and an honorable public servant. I kind of felt a little certain kind of way with Dick Durbin because they eschewed him, they did not support him in that election. At the time, Secretary White would not even sign on to the...
He had to go to court.
He had to go to court to sue. I was part of that team that helped Senator Burris with that. That's the part that I was offended by.
Well, that was after this.
That happened after that, right.
The problem, let's be honest, their math, I bow to a great mathematician on the stage, but there were two positions. There was the Senate and Secretary of State. If you replace Barack Obama with Jesse White, there's a vacancy as Secretary of State. And they were going to put a white guy in there. And so my math is not that good, as we just demonstrated, but I could tell you that there's two black guys who have a seat. And if you replace the second black guy with a white guy, you're lost a seat. So in other words, I think that was part of the equation.
Well, the other part of the equation, these are two white guys evaluating which African American guy is presentable enough to the voting public by their standards, and I think that's what.
And by the way, who is Pritzker? He's just some. Okay, he's a billionaire. I just realized. But how does he get a say? I didn't get to call Blagojevich. Put Rod Sawyer in as Secretary of State. You know what I mean? I'll take the job.
But your answer to the question is that it didn't resonate with the public, or wasn't off-putting, or wasn't fatally off-putting.
I mean, there were certain people that had feelings about it for a while, and I think that JB and Juliana, to her credit, they did go around and talk frankly about it. They did not shy away from it. They dealt with it directly, and it was something when I had Juliana at a senior event one time, right after this occurred, and she dealt with it directly, and she told them, she chastised JB about it, and they talked frankly how about insensitive that was, and You know, sometimes people don't understand intricacies like that are insensitive. And to my, I mean, and I can say a mea culpa to myself, because like I said, I've been a part of similar conversations. And again, it was, I would feel bad if that conversation got out, because it was less than flattering to individuals, and I would have to apologize to them if it got out.
You know, before your time, I don't know if you're following politics, someone did this to Harold Washington. There was a vacancy in the third ward, and what was his name? Skip
Burrell.
Skip Burrell went in with a Mike the mayor.
Mike the mayor.
And it started.
And he said something disparaging about Dorothy
Tillman, a thoroughly unlikable human being. What he said.
He said a couple things about Pat Quinn too.
Racist too. I think
he called her a racist. I think he called her thoroughly unlikable. I don't know. Steve Wiedersberg always tells me he's thoroughly unlikable. Anyway,
he did. Yeah.
And then that tape once again found its way to the Tribune.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny how that
That's strange how that goes.
But
But it did occur, and I remember that. I remember it well, and he had to, apologize to Dorothy Tillman, because she ended up winning.
He endorsed her.
And he endorsed her.
Yeah.
Against, that was after Tyrone Kenner against Skip Burrell.
Yeah, because Tyrone
had went to jail. Yeah.
These things happen. Dan, real quick, did your campaign have an internal debate about how to respond to, how to handle? Is there a way you could capitalize on the J.B. Pritzker tape without seeming like you're trying to capitalize on it? Were these discussions you had within your campaign?
Oh, there's the microphone. I think that the pure political analysis of what happened in the wake of the release of that tape is another lesson in the role of money in politics. One tactical criticism that we got a lot in our campaign was something along the lines of, dude, like, say something different already. We had $7 million, we put probably ballpark 2/3 of it on television, and that, close to $5 million we put on TV was all very much in the same vein. I'm seeing some nodding heads, some dude say something different already heads right now. And the challenge is that when you're in a state this big, up against as much money as you're up against, you have to just get your name out. And I didn't take a poll on election day because the election commission did, and the outcome wasn't so great. But my guess would be that our name recognition, even on election day, was probably south of 80%, maybe even south of 70%. Certainly in the above 60, 65, but probably between 65 and 75. So we had to keep getting our name out. And if you look at the Kennedy campaign's tactics, they were pretty similar, even though the dude started out as a Kennedy. He still had to get that simple, positive message out. We just didn't have the tools to, when it came to our public-facing, expensive media campaign, change message as a result of tactical considerations that arose. By contrast, what Pritzker was able to do was spend millions of dollars of negative ads against each of us. And so with this electorate, with lots of undecideds, I think a lot of people thought, and I'm not going to lie to you, I was one of them, that, hey, all these undecideds in an environment where Pritzker's been visible for so long, they clearly have known about him and haven't chosen him, and then, holy cow, this bad stuff came out, surely they'll go somewhere else. And yet I think when the other campaigns weren't able to drive that critique of Pritzker, and were reliant on the news media and word of mouth, which sort of did their bit for a while and petered out after a week or 2 weeks, and then he was able to drive that negative media with his advertising campaign. I think ultimately he disqualified us more than anything disqualified him, and that's why you saw his numbers tick up at the very end as those undecideds finally were like, Biss sucks, Kennedy sucks, I guess we're gonna go back to Pritzker.
So you didn't have the money to go negative.
We didn't have the money to change our tack, right? Let's say the appropriate response was a purely positive message, but specifically targeted at people who might have been offended by those tapes. We couldn't have done that either. With the kind of resources we had to pick a message track and stay on it, and that constrain what we could do. We criticized those tapes. I talked about it in press conferences and social media and so forth, but that's just a different size of megaphone at the end of the day.
One more question? Anybody got one?
Yeah, so as we've seen in other states, legalizing recreational cannabis has greatly helped with texting and the debt that the states have. Where are we as a county, as a state, in legalizing cannabis to help the debt that we do have?
I swear this question wasn't a plant, to use a bad pun. Bad unintended puns, yeah. No, I mean, Ben and I, we always do what we can to work the question of, marijuana policies into all of our discussions up here. But in all seriousness, this was like a leading issue in this campaign. So, to answer your question, where do things stand?
And I just want to say something I always said in the campaign. As much as I appreciate your question, to me, the policy question of cannabis legalization is primarily independent of revenue, and to me, it's rooted in a question of racial justice. And the fundamental racial justice embedded in the way that our cannabis laws are enforced, not just in Chicago and Cook County, but across Illinois and across the country, I think create a moral necessity for legalization. So that's why I support it, and hey, the revenue is pretty useful too, good point. I don't think there's any chance the current governor would sign it. I think our nominee for governor is a supporter of this. This is one of these issues, frankly, that I think having a progressive grassroots campaign in the race pushed him to take progressive positions, and I'm proud of that. Now our responsibility as a movement is to enforce some accountability, where accountability of a governor is complicated, right? Accountability of a legislator is, hey Rod, vote the right way when the thing comes up. But if the thing never gets to the governor's desk, the accountability of sign it if it got to your desk doesn't do much. So we have a responsibility to, on a movement grassroots level, push Pritzker to really move the legislature to actually act on this. I think we all know that cannabis is going to be legal in 20 years, or 50 years certainly. I think we probably know it's not going to be legal a year from now. And the question of when it happens, and frankly how it happens, I think is going to be a consequence of grassroots activity. And I think the tide is turning in our direction pretty quickly, but never underestimate the extent to which politicians are behind the public on this issue. We got to keep pushing.
I need to say one thing about this, because the problem that it's not the problem that I have with the policy. I do support it. We've gotten so many people that are locked up currently on nonviolent drug offenses, and now we're talking about a way where we can make rich white guys richer, to be honest with you, because even with the medical marijuana right now, there's still no African Americans or people of color significantly involved in the cultivation, in the sale, and I know a lot of guys that are really good at selling weed. And we're not, blacks and Latinos aren't involved in the upswing of this, in the monetary portion of this. So if we're going to reform our laws, I think we need to find ways where they're more inclusive of those that can get involved in the business, be successful, run a great business in the cultivation, in the distribution, in all levels of what we're going to do going forward. And right now, I just don't see that.
I think that's exactly right. I couldn't agree more. And that can be embedded in the way you legalize it in terms of how the licensing process works. I think we've done a terrible job when it comes to medicinal cannabis in Illinois, and we should use that failure as a lesson for how to do it right when it comes to recreational cannabis. And related to something you said at the beginning of your comments, there's a lot of people locked up today.
Yeah.
And what I think only one person can do is commutation of sentences.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the massive, massive changes in our criminal justice policies that are required to reverse the horrible racist ills of mass incarceration, let us suppose we make real progress. We should always push for that progress on a forward-going basis, which would be legislated, to be paired with a real look back on the part of the governor at, hey, who's incarcerated today who would not be had they been sentenced under the new law, and what should we do in support of these populations?
All right, well, we're out of time. Thank you, Alderman Sawyer. Thank you, Senator Biss, for being here and taking all of our questions. Appreciate it. And thanks to all you guys for coming out on one of the crummier weather nights of the year. Ben and I will be back here next month. As usual, we have no idea who will be with us, but we do plan to be here. So thanks so much. Thanks to the Hideout. Thanks to Chris for taping the show. We'll see you guys next month.
Great. And